Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video going over the 29th dev diary for Age of Wonders 4. This one is covering the free Wolf update, which is coming out on the same day that the Primal Fury content pack launches, February 27th. While I want to talk a lot about what we have here in this dev diary, it's a pretty long one, and I want to make sure that I cover some of the screenshots that I've taken from some of the recent dev streams, and I think there's been some other conversations like on Discord that have led to people uncovering some pretty interesting information about the new content that we're going to be getting in Primal Fury and the Free Wolf update. So yeah, if we hop over here towards the end of the stream, they did show off this bow, which is able to summon in a unit at the beginning of combat. It's a new pantheon thing. They also showed off the new druidic terraformers trait, society trait, which is very interesting. There's a lot of information here, and I haven't quite processed it all. It's just interesting to see that there's some economic things. There's something that makes it cheaper for you to have elementals. You start with an extra elemental. I think Avoxel was saying that it pairs nicely with the primal cultures because they're kind of about terraforming. So that's pretty fun. I'm glad that we got that kind of information. We got to see, I think, like the stats on some of these guys. If I zoom out, I think, yeah, you can actually see their defense, attack, and tier. I don't think we actually get to see how much their attacks are, but we did get to see that we have stomps and charge strikes on these guys. This is a tier 2 unit, whereas this is a tier 3 unit. And then somebody pointed out on Discord that you're going to be able to now get different units from Rally of the Legions. This is probably something that's covered in the patch notes in the dev diary that we're going to take a look at in just a minute. But it just really jumps out at you when you're playing the game or when you see it in game. Now you can get Fire Wyverns, the Tyrant Knights, and the Caustic Worms from Rally of the Legions, whereas I think beforehand the only way to get Caustic Worms is through the summoning spell, and I'm pretty sure you weren't able to get Tyrant Knights through Rally of the Legions. I remember getting things like the Swamp Troll and the Fire Giant. Those are tier 4 units through Rally of the Legions, but I think this is different. I think this should make it easier to get some cooler units. We also got to see how Tome of the Reaper changes the Reaper unit specifically. This is now going to be able to, I think Greater Corpse consumption is the same. It's a free action thing that gives you a lot of strength and in health, but they changed the attack so it does frost damage as well as physical damage, and it now ignores half of the target's defense, half of their resistance. Pretty good in general. I think with the uh, one of the bigger changes though comes in the skill. The Finger of the Death is now not a full action, it's a single action, and the fail thing, the damage that you do when you fail the check, now ignores resistance entirely. And there may have been one other thing. I think Dark Rites was a bit different. I don't remember exactly how it works, but now you get some temporary hit points and strengthened when an enemy unit dies. It seems generally pretty good because it can allow you to get a lot of strength on your units, allowing you to do a lot more damage. It doesn't work on combat summons, towers, and siege craft units, which is different than I think a lot of skills. A lot of skills don't have that kind of criteria on them, or a little extra thing tagged on at the end. We also got to see Ascension in the stream. We got to see 3 different traits. We got to see this one, which makes it so you can make things bleed or have immobilize at the end of your turn. If you end your turn next to an enemy, it can keep them locked in place, basically. We have something that makes it so that you have Clinging Mist on your rulers, and then we have Death Call, which was the one they picked. This makes it so that you can summon a random skeleton with a cooldown of 1, so fairly frequently. And Avoxel was saying, yeah, like, who cares about balance? Okay, no, balance is important when you shoot off this skill, but the idea is that it should be kind of powerful, kind of silly, because these are ascended rulers. They're supposed to have something special that really like gives them an identity. Um, After that, I think they showed off some other things about the Bone Dragon last week. The uh, was it? It wasn't called the Exemplar. They used to be called Eagle Riders. Now they're called Exemplars. They have like a, I think, a sword. And yeah, I think now we'll just hop on back to the highlights here. For the wolf date itself, they put some information right at the top here about bounties. There's this new system that you can use to give goals to the other players on the map, whether that's AI or other humans. You can say, I want you to spend 200, or I want you to go take a city, and if you do that, I'll give you 200 of my gold. It's in the quest overview. Many rulers can accept the same bounty, so you can compete to see who can take out a city the fastest. Like we were just talking about, the pantheon is pretty different. We didn't look at the mounts there. I think that was shown off on a previous dev diary. There's, I think, 6 free mounts, as well as like there's some that are associated with the Primal Fury content. We also have some new stuff about rulers. The Ascension thing that we were just showing off is what they're mentioning here. And there's a lot of like little nuances to it, like they keep their transformations, but dragons don't keep all of them because that's part of their leveling up. There's apparently 26 of those Ascension traits that we were just looking at. We saw 3 of them right from the last stream there. It was just going like a few minutes ago for me, but yeah, it'll probably be a little bit later for you when you're watching this video. When you conquer a realm, you apply transformations are maintained. Yeah, that's basically what we were just talking about. There's probably some other things in here that I didn't mention yet. Like they changed it so you get helmets that work better with the different faces. I think some of the helmets weren't working on like the guys who had beaks or something that would stick a little bit further out. So it's cool that they've added that. They've also added some new events, which I hadn't heard about until the stream. I think they mentioned that right then. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So that will allow them to probably join your games more often as heroes. I think they mentioned that this wasn't turned off for multiplayer, but I've never seen a Pantheon hero appear in multiplayer. I turned all of mine off except for a dragon to try and see if I could get a dragon to spawn as one of my secondary heroes in multiplayer, because I have seen that happen before in single player. It's just something that it would be a bit powerful in multiplayer, and I think it's turned off for a similar reason. They increased the rarity of Pantheon hero events. So yeah, and I think that means that you're even more likely to see it in single player than you used to be. Hero recruitment is quite a bit different now. They've made it so that there's no longer, I think, a soft cap that you can go over and pay an upkeep for being over. What you do is you need to pay imperium essentially to get to your extra hero slot early, or you can wait time. I think they said the first hero cap increases in 10 turns, and then after that it takes 5 turns longer. Each one I think takes 5 turns longer, so it goes I think 10, 15, 20, 25 turns in between each hero. And if you want to spend your Imperium, you can do that to make it a little bit faster. I don't think they give us the rate here, but I think we've seen that in stream, so if you wanted to, you could probably figure that out. There's also the leadership clash or clashing egos, which reduces morale and XP for heroes when they are in the same stack. So you want to basically put one hero in charge of each army, and that should be pretty efficient in general. Necromancy is a lot different. I think in general it's better than it used to be. And I'm really excited to give things a try again, because I really like the Souls economy, but I feel like it generally wasn't super efficient. And now from like the streams, it's looking pretty efficient. They were getting like the ability to hire 10 or so units after each combat. I think every unit they kill, they have the ability to hire in necromancy. But the limiting factor is the number of souls that you have actually accumulated. So you're not going to be able to hire all of those units that you kill every turn forever and always. Or at least I don't think that's how these pieces are supposed to fit together. Now you get less souls when you kill units, but I think they're generally more useful. And you can get the rewards during combat, allowing you to spend souls on spells immediately. That's great for things soul overflow, which is pretty expensive. Soulbound can now create decaying zombies. That's massive. Soulbound used to be okay. It can make it so you get more souls, but having it have a combat effect makes this a lot better. And I like that's a dice roll. 30% means you can't rely on it, but it can really swing the battle in your favor when that triggers on the right unit. Constructing skeleton solar comes from the necromancy tome. You can now use reanimation skills to get that. So post combat raising, I was talking about that a second ago. It basically costs you souls to get that, but I think that it's is pretty expensive in general. It takes 15 souls to do that, and if you kill one tier 1 unit, you only get 1 soul. So not nothing. You can get 4 base skeletons: the shield, polearm, archer, battle mage. When you kill higher tier units, you can get things like the bone horror or the bone dragon. They require a lot of souls, 50 souls and 100 souls, but I think they're very good units, so I could see that being worth the cost. I'm just not sure how quickly you can actually accumulate the souls to support that just yet. That'll be interesting to see in multiplayer how that actually lines up, see if it gets you enough momentum fast enough. We now have, yeah, like the skeleton reanimation skill. That's pretty good. Necrotize looked really nice in the games, because you can get in the streams, because you can get that early. I think you can get it right from the first time, so you can have it like on turn 1, and that allows you to get a really good action economy, or momentum in your combats, because you can just spawn in units from killing units. So you take a unit away from the enemy, you give yourself another one. That's going to make it really hard for them to do anything meaningful to the remainder of your units. I know Necromancer changed from tier 2 to tier 3. I don't remember anything else off the top of my head. They did show it off at one point. They moved some things from tier 2 tomes to like tier 3s, or like around a little bit, like restoring a dead, summoning corrupt souls are different. They're now in souls versus different one. It's just balancing basically. There's a lot of things in here, but in general, it looks like it's going to be pretty good. Soulfire was removed. That was a pretty powerful one, but I think you're getting some other nice toys in the same place of it. We've already talked about the Reaper a little bit and the changes that are there, so we're not going to go into too much detail on these. We're just going to cover the fact that these are better, and I think there's maybe another change to the higher level necromancy units. There was another one, the Living Fog. I didn't see anything in here about Living Fog though, so that one may be still the same. Generally, it was a pretty good unit. Quality of life updates. They added some things about randomizing realms. I think I've talked about that in previous things. You can do things to free cities. Yeah, because they weren't using late game or late tome units. They were just kind of doing the same racial units throughout the entire game, and so that led to armies being not too hard to conquer. Generally, people think that the tome units are better than the cultural units, so you could, yeah, it wasn't too bad to go over to those cities and conquer them if you really wanted to. We have a dismantle province operation that's good for hermit kingdoms, as well as just people in general. If they make a mistake, if they click the wrong button, now you don't have to go back and reload an old save. You can click a button and it'll take a certain amount of turns for it to just disappear again, basically. You can toggle visibility. These are things that I think a lot of people who've been paying attention to the development of this update are pretty aware with. So yeah, you can just make it so your visual effects are either there or visual or not, but the mechanics are still there. There is some difference to the UI. I think they made it so that there's like nice flower effects on the side too, as well as just like the UI is cleaner. It shows you adjacency more clearly, and at least in my opinion, it's very easy to see things, or it looks like it's much easier to read things with the new UI. AI is supposed to be a bit differently, so that they pick tomes a bit differently, and they don't just go for one affinity. I thought that's what it was saying, actually. It seems like it's saying that they go more for their primary affinity. I thought that they were doing that a lot already, and that it made it easy to predict what you're going to be fighting. But maybe I'm misunderstanding what they're saying here about the AI. Very easy is no longer getting an imperium boost, and that probably means that they're not going to be able to spam out as many free units when they lose their units. I'm not entirely sure, but there's a few other things in here that probably just made the game line up a little bit better with their intentions. Infestations are now expanding slower, and the rate is going to be quite a bit slower for 11 through 20 turns, and then the first, not sure I understand this. Yeah, 8 to 15 turns is going to be, I guess they're both a little bit slower, but there's some overlap there. Interesting. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Passive versus low. Okay, so you have like two options here now, two different options. Passive versus low are going to do two different things than they used to. The art is slightly different. There isn't a lot here. I guess they added some new face options for elves, which is neat. I guess that was probably not. There wasn't too many options, but it seems like they have some extra time. The art team has some extra time, so they're able to go back and add some fun things like that. I guess we could talk a little bit about audio, but that's one of the things I'm less interested in. Combat is going to have some pretty big changes. Pole arms are no longer going to have. Let's see. Only polearm units and some units have charge resistance, which was removed from large units, and Guy is chosen. Heavy charge strike is changed to melee charge strike, except for giants. I think heavy charge strike would cancel out retaliation and things that usually have charge resistance, whereas charge resistance would ignore that retaliation and canceling defense mode on a normal charge strike. So it's interesting the way they're kind of rebalancing that mechanic. They're changing a few different systems across a few different units to, I think, try and bring it more in line with what they originally intended for charge strike. Also made it so that there's some difference with hero skills and enchantments, such as magic blast or charge strike. That probably means, yes, this has to do with repeating attacks. So repeating attacks are more likely or they're less likely to get a status effect to trigger on each repeating shot because they have more attempts on an attack. That's if they take 3 of their repeating attacks versus a single action attack. If they have to move and then only do 1, it's I would say less likely to trigger a status effect than a single action attack. I think that's how the current system is built in this version that they're talking about in the patch notes. Right, this says when a summon times out, it no longer says when a unit dies. Interesting. It no longer triggers when a unit dies status type effects. Yeah, because if the timer runs out, then the unit didn't die, and that can lead to things like slip away triggering, right? I think that's what that's talking about, but I don't remember seeing slip away triggering on units that ran out of their time on their timer, like a tier 1 spider or something like that. That has the evolution thing. There's some changes to the way critical and fumble chances are calculated. They're no longer done in one calculation for the entire turn or that unit's actions. Now it can do an individual roll for each repeating attack. There's also changes to misfortune. I've covered that before. Changes to burning and electrified, and steadfast is interesting. I hadn't seen steadfast talked about yet. You can no longer be targeted by spells and abilities that instantly kill a unit. So you can't get around steadfast with things that instantly kill a unit. That's really interesting because I think maybe things like Sleep of Oblivion might have been able to get around that. I don't remember trying to change that. Steadfast gained from Berserker's rage can now be dispelled. Yeah, I remember hearing about that at one point. It's annoying when somebody's got steadfast and you can't get rid of it, because it really allows them to do a lot more on certain units, like for example heroes. Berserkers are pretty good too. They have that. I don't think they have figures, so they can just do a lot of damage even after sustaining a bit of damage. Spawn can end the invasion properly now. Correctly only grant evasion against physical range and magic attacks. So I think that used to work with melee attacks. I don't remember seeing that talked about before, but I know a lot of people weren't using Spawnkin, so it's interesting that they're kind of like nerfing that a tiny bit. Barbarians are changing. They have changed their primal strike. We have changed to brutal mark, as long as a few other things. I haven't looked closely at this yet, but one interesting thing is that their special building is getting an increased amount of knowledge and an increased amount of draft. I say generally that's a good trade, because knowledge is better than draft in general. You're going to need knowledge throughout the game to unlock more tomes, whereas draft you may or may not be using to build more units. And I think I heard that there was other things change across the different cultures that made their like cultural buildings slightly better. They reduced the cost on this thing to make it easier to build. It's almost like half the original production cost. So now you can actually make the forest estates. And I have to imagine that there's some other buildings that they reduced the cost to as well. Like you can see here, the Dark Forge also had its cost reduced. There's there's a lot of things I remember looking at being like, there's no reason for me to build this. It's like twice as expensive as something else that gives me just as much. But you can see this one's better, this one's better, this is worst. Getting less production makes sense because production in general is pretty good. Um, but yeah, I think that these changes they kind of like make sense when you compare them to one another. There's gone and reduced the cost on all of these, I think, except for the Reavers. They didn't have the cost reduced, did they? No, they did. There, it was just not placed at the end. It was placed in the middle. They also changed something with the Harrier and the Overseer, so that the accuracy has it works the same on the Harriers, and Subdue can now capture gilded enemies. So many little nuances that you can miss in this game. Diplomacy economy has changed a little bit. Players now get their 40 imperium income from a global property instead of being tied to the throne city structure, which I think means stability shouldn't affect it, right? They increased the governor resource bonuses so that you get more. It looks like doubled the amount of food you get from the affinity. I used to think that this was like a pretty meaningless improvement, that the main benefits you get for putting a governor on are from certain traits that some leaders have and others just simply don't. So it's good to see that this is going to have a bigger impact. I'm sure that with the way the hero cap and cities lead to you having to make more meaningful choices with your Imperium, that will lead to the governor bonuses being more impactful too. We now have reduced food requirements for population, meaning we're going to have bigger cities a lot quicker. I like that. I hadn't seen that talked about anywhere. So you're going to be able to put more on your cities, and maybe you'll have to worry about stability a little bit quicker because each province you add to a thing decreases the stability. Wow, we're only like halfway through. There's a lot here that we can go into a lot of detail, but I feel like we've covered a lot of the main things. I'm just gonna try and find the highlights for each of these. So seems like town hall's worse, the workshop's worse. These amplifier lenses are better, or no, they require more. The vision things you get are better. That's good because vision's always nice. Seafarer Guild is now going to work on underground lakes. Yes, underground lakes should count as water tiles. It's just something they missed in the tags, I think. Advanced logistics has changed, so that works on increasing in tactical combat. That's important. You want that as well. Adaptive research is different. Ooh, interesting. Reduce the cost from 50% to 25%. That makes it less of an obvious choice. I think a lot of people are just like, you get that every game. Teleportation mastery is different. Military engineering is different. All these things are just slightly tweaked, right? Resource bonus now also works on underground lakes. Yay! That makes sense. It's just like this other one, Seafaring Guild. Underground lakes count now. Nature order, city stability now. Bonus now also works on mangrove forests. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I think it used to be different forest types would get bonus for this, but there's a lot of different forest types in there, right? We have a faction creation update so that you can now do like your city naming differently. You can actually customize your biographies, which is massive. I remember when I first saw the game and I saw that you couldn't actually write in that space, being like, I thought we were supposed to be able to create our own creations and share them with people. So now that you got that, that's amazing. It's probably just like because it's different than the previous things that they've made in Age of Wonders, they had to set aside extra time to do it. It was probably always on their list of things they wanted to accomplish. You can now go back and change the traits after picking the culture, and this is to prevent invalid combinations, right? Because terraforming the regular way, the like swamp adaptation, isn't supposed to be combinable with the Meyer Croc thing. So they've made it so that, it'll tell you that you can't make this build at some point if you try to pick them at the same time. We now we see some changes to things like the Desolate's adaptation. You can now, I think, like shape the earth to be ashland, and there's probably some other things in here that are slightly different. They made Pack Hunter cost 2 points, or rather they added it and it cost 2 points. We now have Consume Flora, that's 2 points. Mounted Masters 2 points. Eagle Mounts is 4 points. These are things we've seen in the previous streams. Yeah, these are the terraforming things, right? The Arctic adaptation gives you freeze the land. Now it's renamed to a different thing, Earth shaped snow. Yeah, now you have different Earth shapes, which is cool. That makes it easier to navigate things and understand what's happening here. I think you can um, combine this with the druidic terraformers. That would make sense, right? I don't think there's any limitation between those two, so that you can make that cheaper. Um, Underground society traits, hermit kingdoms changed, so that's now just plus 15%, not plus 30. Okay, that makes it a lot less obvious of a choice too. That was something that people were banning because it was just too easy to get a lot of knowledge from this general build. And they also changed fabled hunters, so it's now not 100% but now 75%. I don't know if that's a big enough difference to be meaningful. I feel like 50% would have been fine. But I don't know. I'm sure some people would have said it's not that good. People are overreacting. There's a lot of differences to the rulers. These are like a bunch of the base game rulers. They had their personalities changed, which is interesting. But I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about that. We're only like a little bit past halfway, I think. Free cities are different, so that you can now get, I think, like we talked about with the Rally of Lieges, you can get some better units from them. There's new upgrade packages. I'm not sure what that means exactly. I guess that's like the different types of people that you can come across in your games. If you have the Empires of Ashes, then and only then you can see the Followers of Alchemy. They'd probably have the Tome of Alchemy. I thought that makes a lot of sense. Actually, the more I think about it, they changed some of the present traits, ensure that free cities follow the same theme as the rest of the world. That's cool. I like that. So if like you've got a place that's on fire, you might see some demonkins or some fiend types free cities. I liked it when you would see like things that didn't necessarily work because that made it your own unique experience. But I think that people might enjoy this more. What else did they add? They added something about making dragon claws. Yep, that's pretty cool. And they also made it so that you have a higher like stun chances on single action attacks. It seems there's some new primary infusions. Interesting. I hadn't seen that talked about. So you can get a line um, attack, a chain attack, a cascading attack, a blast attack. Wow. Okay. You can displace and replace, push back. There's a lot here. And they didn't show off any of this in the streams. They didn't do any crafting. They focused more on the necromancy and the primal culture, I think, over the past few weeks. But yeah, now this is mutually exclusive with the wind barrier infusion, means that you can't just stack a lot of the other combinations that we were seeing previously. That makes a lot of sense because some of them were getting a bit out of control. I think being able to stack a lot of damage against one enemy type could lead to you doing like plus 160% damage to a dragon, which is fun, but I think a bit much. Reduce negative morale by minus 50% instead of minus 100%. Is that from the item forge? I guess it must be. Interface is a lot less interesting to me than the other things that we've looked at. Descriptive text, controllers, miscellaneous, okay. Multiplayer, okay, that's nice. It seems like they've worked on a few things here that I'm going to be seeing in multiplayer. Onboarding is just like getting people ready to play the game. We've already talked a little bit about Pantheon, but there's more here. I think that they were talking a little bit about changing the points that you get for completing a realm, which is nice. It's good that they're thinking about that. But yeah, I think we're pretty close to the end here. I'm just going to mention that we have some other changes in here about the tomes, like mirror magic. I think mirror mimics were units that people really did not like using. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that become a unit that people use more often because I find the interaction very interesting. Being able to say, you've got this, now I have this, and you can't use its tricks as easily is pretty cool. Like being able to get something that does freeze but is immune to freeze from an enemy who's just going to freeze a bunch of units. It's nice. It's nice to have that option available to you. I guess we could talk about things like the Houndmasters have their Warhound's HP increased, as well as like there's some changes to the Gremlins. They have the tiny tag, which I think makes them harder to hit. Infectious Insanity was amazing. It now has a 90% chance to affect a unit if resisted insanity is implied instead. So it's either Infectious Insanity or Insanity. I don't think it used to have a chance to become infectious insanity. I think it just was insanity, which I loved when somebody applied that on a dragon and then it applied infectious insanity on like 8 units of its own using an area effect breath. That was pretty funny. I'm to Almigdar in one of my multiplayers, I believe. Scalds, I think, are not as good as they used to be. They reduce their health, defenses, damage, and no longer gives haste and gives regeneration instead. Songs are now cast around the skull, affecting it and adjacent friendly targets. So you can't get these AoEs off as easily. I think they used to have a range on them. Now it's just in the immediate vicinity, which is a pretty big difference. I think Chaos Eaters was something people skipped a lot. Now it deals additional damage instead of this type of damage instead of that type of damage. Increase the chance of applying a stats effect from 30 to 60. That might be enough to make it good, but I have a feeling a lot of people will still generally avoid it and turn their Chaos Eaters into Balers using the I think it's the Fight to Power spell. Boy, oh boy, what else is in here? Secret Hours got moved. We saw that before. Terramancy is different. Earth Shatter now removes diggable terrain. I'm sure there's a lot more in here that I could talk about, but I don't want to spend a lot of time looking for each of those details right now. If you've got anything that you think is going to be really impactful that you've seen in the notes, please let me know in the comment section below. I'm getting pretty close to wrapping up the video. I'm just like checking the last few things in here to see if there's anything that jumps out to me immediately. They mentioned something about Tome of the Beacon being different, like Lightbringers are better. I've already mentioned that before in previous videos. Tome of Supremacy is now going to be cheaper to build the monument. Eagle Riders was renamed, added a shield to the unit to better convey its role. It's a shield unit. Yeah, that. I like that visual. Um, yeah, I think we'll wrap up here. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you around. Have a good one.